My name is Helen King. I'm 32 years old, and I've spent the last 5 years building a graphic design business from absolutely nothing. The morning everything changed, I was clutching an empty portfolio on the number 9 bus at 6:15 in the morning. My business account had just been drained. $15,000 gone. The elderly woman sitting next to me quietly slid over a monthly bus pass. "Don't let them make you their story, dear," she whispered. I thought she was just a kind stranger. 3 weeks later, I knew exactly who she was and why my parents looked absolutely terrified when she walked into that courtroom. It started with the notifications. I woke up at 5:42 to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen lit up the darkness of my small studio apartment. Harbor Valley Bank. Transaction approved. $328. I frowned, my mind thick with sleep. Maybe it was the automated payment for my business insurance. But that wasn't due for another week. Before I could clear the notification, another one buzzed. Transaction approved. $512. Then another, and another. They came in a cascade, one after the other, 17 transactions in total. Each one felt like a hammer blow against everything I had worked for. I sat up, my heart pounding, and opened my banking app with shaking hands. Business savings account. Current balance $4.63. I stared at the screen. The numbers didn't make sense. That account had held $15,000. 5 years of work. Every late night, every difficult client, every weekend I spent working instead of living. It was supposed to be my final payment for the Apex Tech rebranding contract, the biggest project of my career. It was gone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the bank's 24-hour line. When someone finally answered, I just started yelling. Fraud. Someone emptied my account. I need this reversed immediately. The agent, a woman named Sarah, had that coded tone of bored detachment. "Ma'am, let me review the activity." I could hear typing in the background. A long, agonizing pause. "Okay, I'm seeing these charges. They all appear to be card-present transactions. What does that mean?" I practically screamed into the phone. "It means the physical card was swiped, ma'am, at multiple locations. A jewelry store, a luxury furniture boutique, a resort spa." "That's impossible. My card is right here in my wallet." I stumbled out of bed and grabbed my purse from the kitchen counter. I dumped everything onto the floor: keys, loose business cards, lipstick, old receipts. No wallet. I found it kicked under the sofa cushion. I ripped it open. The slot where my debit card lived was empty. The memory hit me like ice water. My mother, Diane, standing in my kitchen last week. She'd been crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "It's the utility bill, honey. There's been a terrible mix-up. They're going to shut off our power tomorrow. Can I just borrow your card to pay it online? Just this once. I promise I'll give it right back tomorrow." I had handed it to her. I had typed my PIN into the utility website myself while she watched over my shoulder. And then her phone had rung. Her ride was there. She had rushed out, promising to drop the card off the next day. I had texted her 4 times over the week. "Mom, I really need my card back. I have payments to make." "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry," she'd replied. It completely slipped my mind. "It's safe right here in my purse. Stop worrying so much. You know I'd never do anything to hurt you." I looked back at my phone screen, at the $4.63. "Ma'am," the bank agent was saying, her tone shifting from boredom to something harder. "I'm also seeing that the correct PIN was entered for every single transaction. And looking at your account history, I see you authorized your mother, Diane King, to make a withdrawal 6 months ago. That establishes a pattern of authorization. This doesn't meet our criteria for fraud. This appears to be a civil dispute." A civil dispute. The words felt like a slap. She stole $15,000 from my business account. You'll need to resolve this with the authorized user, Ms. King. We cannot reverse these charges. You can file a police report, but without clear evidence of forced theft, the bank's position is that these are valid transactions. The line went dead. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by the contents of my purse, the gray morning light beginning to seep through the blinds. I pulled up the transaction list again and started taking screenshots. Harbor View, fine jewelry, $4,200. Bella Furniture and Design, $3,800. Serenity Springs Resort and Spa, $2,400. I kept screaming at the screen. I printed every transaction. The paper was still warm when I grabbed it from my printer. I didn't shower. I pulled on yesterday's jeans and a sweater, stuffed the statements into my bag, and walked out into the cold morning. I got on the number 9 bus, the one I used to take before my business started making enough money for a car payment. The bus smelled like coffee and diesel fuel. I sat down heavily near the back, clutching my design portfolio like a shield, even though it was empty. That's when the old woman sat down next to me. She was small, wearing a worn peacoat that had seen better days and a simple wool scarf. She looked like any other pensioner riding the morning bus. She must have seen the look on my face, or maybe she saw the bank statements clutched in my hand. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just reached into her bag and pulled out a monthly bus pass. She held it out to me. "Take this, dear. You look like you could use one less worry." I turned to her, startled. "I can't take your bus pass." She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I have another, and you need it more than I do right now." Then she said something that made no sense to me at the time. "Don't let them make you their story." I must have looked at her like she was crazy. She just patted my hand. "Whatever it is, document everything, keep the paper." People get loud. Paper stays quiet. Paper wins. Before I could respond, she stood up and moved to a different seat. I watched her go, confused and overwhelmed. I pocketed the bus pass without really thinking about it. All I could focus on was the fact that my life was falling apart. When I got to my parents' house, the sun was fully up. Their home looked exactly as it always did. Modest, neat, the picture of middle-class respectability. My father's car, a sensible sedan, sat in the driveway. I used my old key to let myself in. "Mom? Dad?" "In the living room, honey." My mother's voice called out, cheerful and bright. "We're just having coffee." I walked in and stopped cold. The living room had new furniture, a cream-colored leather sectional that must have cost thousands, new lamps, new curtains, and on the coffee table sat shopping bags from stores I recognized. Luxury stores. My $15,000 was sitting in my parents' living room. My mother, Diane, looked up and beamed at me. She was wearing a new silk blouse. She smelled of expensive perfume. "Helen, what a lovely surprise. You're just in time. Your father and I were just talking about our trip." "Trip?" I repeated. My voice sounded flat, distant. "Yes," my father, Robert, said. He was reading a travel brochure. He didn't look up. "We've decided to retire to the Seychelles. It's a wonderful opportunity. We've been working so hard for so many years. We deserve this." I couldn't speak. The new furniture, the shopping bags, the talk of international retirement, my business, my contract, my entire future. It was all sitting in their living room, repackaged as their dream. "I need to use your bathroom," I managed to say. I walked down the hall on autopilot. Her purse was sitting on the hall table, a new leather bag. I didn't hesitate. I reached inside and pulled out my debit card. Right next to it was a folded receipt. "Harbor View, fine jewelry. One lady's diamond bracelet. Total $4,218. I walked back into the living room. I placed my debit card on the coffee table. Then I placed the receipt on top of it. "You bought a $4,000 bracelet with my business account." My voice still didn't sound like my own. You bought furniture. You went to a spa. You drained my entire savings. My mother's face crumpled instantly. The tears came like someone had turned on a faucet. Oh, Helen, you don't understand. We borrowed it. Just borrowed it? Your father needed new clothes for the business meetings about our retirement property. We were going to pay you back as soon as the escrow closes on the Seychelles villa. Borrowed? I looked at my father. He was finally looking at me, his eyes cold and calculating. You should be more understanding, Helen. We're your family. We needed it, and you have a good income. You can make more. This is for our future, our security. The anger was rising in my throat now, hot and bitter. That was my final payment for the Apex contract. That was 5 years of my life. You stole from me. I'm calling the police. My father's expression didn't change, but something dangerous entered his voice. He leaned forward. You do that, Helen. You call them, and then we'll make some calls of our own. What are you talking about? Your clients, he said, his voice smooth and cold. That big one. Apex Tech. We'll just have to let them know that our daughter is having a mental health crisis, that she's unstable, accusing her loving parents of terrible things. How do you think that will look? Do you think they'll want someone unstable handling their brand? The threat hung in the air between us. He was going to destroy my business, my reputation, everything I had built. He saw my hesitation and smiled. We're your family, Helen. We look out for each other. You wouldn't want to damage the family name, would you? That's your name, too. I looked at my mother. She had already dried her tears. She pushed my debit card across the table toward me. See? No harm done, just a little family misunderstanding. You've been working too hard, honey. You're stressed. That's why you're overreacting. I took my card. I left their house. I didn't drive back to my apartment. I couldn't face it. I sat in my car for an hour in their driveway, shaking. Then I drove to the police station. The Harborview Police Precinct smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I sat on a hard plastic bench for 45 minutes before an officer called my name. Officer Donnelly had a tired face and skeptical eyes. I laid everything out in the small interview room. The 17 transactions, the $15,000, the jewelry receipt, the threats against my clients. He typed slowly, 2 fingers pecking at the keyboard. So let me get this straight. You're saying your mother used your debit card without permission. She stole it, I corrected. She drained my business account, and my father threatened me when I confronted them. But you've let her use this card before, he said. Once, 6 months ago. For a specific utility bill. I authorize one payment. He sighed and leaned back. His chair creaked. Ma'am, this is a family dispute. You gave her access to your accounts in the past. It sounds like you had an arrangement and now you're regretting it. That's a civil matter, not a criminal one. I could feel the walls closing in. This is theft and credit card fraud. He held up his hand. We can't prove who entered the PIN. You admit she had prior authorized access. I can't arrest your mother because you two are having a disagreement about money. He handed me a slip of paper with a case number. I knew just by looking at it that nothing would happen. It wasn't a real case file. It was a domestic incident report that would sit in a digital folder and never be opened. I left the police station feeling hollow. My next call was to the bank again. I fought through the automated system and got a supervisor. I gave her my police report number. Her response was immediate and cold. Miss King, I've reviewed your file. As we explained, the transactions were card present with the correct PIN. Your account history shows prior authorization for this individual. The bank is not in a position to mediate family financial arrangements. These are valid charges. We will not be issuing a credit. Both doors had slammed shut. The police wouldn't help. The bank wouldn't help. I was completely alone. I went home and logged into my credit monitoring service, something I checked maybe once a year. What I saw made the room spin. It wasn't just my business savings. There were 2 new credit cards, one from National Bank with a $10,000 limit, one from Prestige Department Store with an $8,000 limit. Both opened 3 weeks ago, both maxed out. Electronics, designer clothes, airline tickets, and a personal loan. $20,000 from an online lender called Bayview Capital, issued just 10 days ago. My credit score, which I had spent years building to 780, was now 520. I had $48,000 in debt I had never seen. They hadn't just stolen my present, they had stolen my future. My phone rang. The caller ID said Apex Tech. It was Jeremy, the CEO. Helen, good morning. Just touching base about that final payment. We need the completed branding package by end of business Friday. You confirmed the timeline last month, so we're all set, right? I pressed my forehead against the cool wall of my apartment. Jeremy, I started, my voice cracking. There's been a significant emergency, a fraud situation. I don't have the funds to complete the project on the timeline we discussed. There was a long silence. Oh, he said. All the warmth left his voice. Helen, I'm sorry to hear that, but we have a signed contract. If you can't deliver, we'll need to discuss breach of contract and our deposit refund. I'll have our legal team reach out. The line went dead. I had lost my biggest client. My business was dying. I sat at my kitchen table and did what I always do when the world feels chaotic. I started organizing. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it Recovery File. I started building a timeline. Every transaction, every text message, every email, every lie. And then I started making phone calls. I called my cousin Emma first. She was 25, just out of grad school, working her first real job in marketing. Hey, Emma, weird question. Did Aunt Diane ever ask you for money? The silence on the other end was so long I thought the call had dropped. Why? What did she do to you now? How much, Emma? $8,000, she said quietly. The shame was heavy in her voice. Last year. She said Uncle Robert had a medical emergency. They needed it for the hospital bill, and they'd pay me back when their retirement account matured. I emptied my savings. Did you ever get it back? No. When I asked about it after 6 months, she started crying. She told my mom I was stressing her out, that I was being selfish after all the times she'd helped our family. My own mother got angry at me for bothering them. I just let it go. It was easier than fighting everyone. I hung up and called my older sister, Claire. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years, not since her wedding. She had moved to Seattle and cut contact with the entire family. I always thought she was being dramatic. Cold. Now I was starting to understand. She picked up on the 5th ring. Helen! Her voice was guarded, suspicious. Claire, I know this is out of nowhere, but I need to ask you about Mom and Dad. I told her everything. The drained account, the credit cards, the loan, what happened to Emma. She didn't sound surprised. She just sounded exhausted. $12,000, she said flatly. What? That's what they took from me 2 weeks before my wedding, the money for the venue and catering. Mom offered to handle the payments directly, said it would be easier. She'd deal with the vendors and I could focus on other things. Instead, they went on an anniversary cruise to the Mediterranean. When I confronted them, they told the entire family I was having a bridal meltdown, that I was mentally unstable and making things up. Dad sent an email to all our relatives saying I needed psychiatric help. They almost destroyed my wedding, Helen. That's why I left. I couldn't fight them anymore. The pattern was suddenly horrifically clear. They found a target. They waited for a vulnerable moment, a new job, a wedding, a major business contract. They created a crisis, took the money, and when you dared to fight back, they deployed the same weapon every time. Character assassination. Ungrateful, unstable, mentally ill. They painted the victim as the villain. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was their latest mark. The designer in me took over. The part of my brain trained to organize chaos, to find patterns, to create order from disorder. I took out my professional camera and started documenting everything. I photographed my empty wallet. I photographed the jewelry receipt. I photographed my laptop screen showing the credit report with $48,000 in fraudulent debt. I scanned the police report. I scanned the bank denial letters. I created a new encrypted folder on an external hard drive. I called it Case HK. I built a timeline in the spreadsheet. Date, amount, evidence, witness statements. I left my apartment and walked 3 blocks to a convenience store. I bought a cheap prepaid phone and a $50 phone card. I went back home and spent the next 4 hours systematically changing every password I had, every bank account, every email address, every social media profile, every client portal. I set up 2-factor authentication routed to the new prepaid phone. I turned off my regular smartphone and put it in a drawer. It felt compromised, like they could reach through it and hurt me. Then I went online and froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. It was too late for the $48,000, but they wouldn't be able to open another account in my name. I worked until midnight. When I finally fell into bed, exhausted, I felt the smallest sliver of control returning. I was documenting. I was building walls. At 2:30 in the morning, a sound woke me. A sharp crack from outside, followed by the hiss of spray paint. I ran to my window and looked down at the street. My car was parked under a streetlight. A figure in a dark hoodie was running away, disappearing around the corner. On my windshield, dripping in the sickly yellow light, was a single word in red spray paint. Liar. I stood there with my hand over my mouth, the prepaid phone clutched in my other hand. They weren't just defending themselves. They were attacking. The message was clear. Shut up or else. The red paint was still wet when the next blow landed. I was outside scrubbing my windshield with paper towels and window cleaner at 7 in the morning when a car pulled up. A man in a suit got out holding a manila envelope. Helen King? Yes, you've been served. He handed me the envelope and got back in his car. I tore it open right there on the sidewalk. It was a temporary restraining order, an emergency order for protection from harassment filed by Robert and Diane King against me. I was legally ordered to stay 100 yards away from my parents, their home, their church, and their associates. I was forbidden from contacting them or anyone connected to them. The hearing was set for 30 days out. I scanned the attached affidavit. My mother's handwriting filled the pages. Our daughter, Helen, has become increasingly unstable and violent. She stormed into our home, making wild accusations of theft. She was screaming and irrational. We are elderly and in fear for our safety. We believe she is suffering from a mental health crisis and may be a danger to herself and others. They had used my own police report against me. The vandalism on my car was the punctuation mark. They had created the crisis and then called the authorities to paint me as the aggressor. I was legally silenced, but the campaign didn't stop there. It went digital. The first email arrived that afternoon. It was from my aunt, my father's sister, forwarding me something. The subject line, written by my mother, was prayers for Helen. I opened it with a sense of dread. It was a mass email sent to what looked like hundreds of people, family members, church friends, and horrifyingly, people I knew professionally. People whose email addresses she must have gotten from my old computer or my holiday card list years ago. Dear friends and family, the email began. It is with a broken heart that Robert and I must share painful news. Our beloved daughter, Helen, is suffering from a severe mental health crisis. She has become paranoid and is experiencing delusions that we have stolen money from her. We are heartbroken and terrified. She has been lashing out and making threats. We have had to involve the authorities for our own safety. Please do not engage with her if she contacts you with these stories. She is not herself. We ask only for your prayers as we try to get her the help she desperately needs. With love and sorrow, Diane and Robert. It was a masterpiece of social assassination. In one email, I was transformed from victim to villain. They were the suffering, loving parents. I was the crazy, dangerous daughter. They had preemptively poisoned every relationship I had. The fallout was swift. An hour later, I got a call from Apex Tech. Helen? Jeremy's voice was different this time. Corporate, distant. After receiving some concerning information about your current situation, we've decided it's best to terminate our contract effective immediately. We'll be seeking our deposit refund and handling the project internally. Terminate. The word felt like a punch. Jeremy, please, I can't explain. The decision is final. Good luck with everything. By the end of the day, 2 more clients had canceled. One was a local restaurant group I'd worked with for 2 years. The other was a real estate company. Both cited schedule changes. Both had been on my mother's email list. The studio space I'd been trying to save up for was gone. My retainer clients were gone. My reputation was in ashes. And then the final piece of paper came. It was taped to my apartment door when I got home from buying groceries. A bright orange notice, pay or quit. With my accounts empty and my income severed, I'd missed rent. The eviction process had started. I sat on my living room floor surrounded by the evidence. The restraining order, the termination emails, the eviction notice, the spray-painted car parked outside. My parents had executed a perfect scorched earth campaign. I was broke, discredited, and about to be homeless. I had $4.63 in my account. I had $48,000 in debt I'd never seen, and I had no way to fight back. I picked up my prepaid phone with shaking hands and called the only person I had left. My best friend Ava answered on the first ring. "It's me," I said. My voice broke. They won. I have nothing left. Ava Chun had been my best friend since college. She was a data analyst, someone who lived and breathed spreadsheets and pattern recognition. She didn't panic. She solved problems. She was at my door in 20 minutes. She didn't hug me or offer empty comfort. She just looked at the restraining order, the eviction notice, and the red paint still visible on my car through the window. "Pack a bag," she said. "You're staying at my place. And bring that hard drive you told me about." Ava's apartment in North Harbor was clean and minimalist, all white walls and big windows overlooking the water. As soon as I dropped my bag, she sat me down on her sofa and opened her laptop. "Okay," she said. "You're done reacting. You're done being emotional. That's what they want. They want you hysterical. That's how they win. We're not going to be hysterical. We're going to be systematic." She turned the laptop toward me. "You're a graphic designer. Your entire job is visual organization and documentation. So let's document." She looked at me with sharp, focused eyes. "Don't argue. Don't engage. Don't call them. Every time you want to scream, you scan a receipt instead. We're not building a case for a family fight. We're building a financial map." She created a secure online group that night, an invitation-only space where we could compile evidence. "Who else did you mention?" "Emma." "Claire." I sent them invitations. Claire joined within 30 minutes. Emma joined 10 minutes later. Then I thought about my mother's email. She'd made a mistake. By sending that mass email, she'd given me a list of everyone she'd contacted, a list of potential victims. I started going through the names. My Aunt Judith, my mother's older sister, a widow who lived quietly across town. I sent her a carefully worded message. "Aunt Judith, this is Helen. I'm working on a private family matter and wanted to ask if you've ever had any financial concerns regarding mom and dad, specifically anything involving loans or investments. She called me within 15 minutes. Her voice was thin and shaking. Helen, that group you invited me to. Recovery file? Is this about your mother? Yes, Aunt Judith, it is. Oh, dear God, she whispered. She was crying, but it wasn't my mother's performative sobbing. It was the exhausted crying of someone who'd been silent too long. She told me I was confused. She told everyone I was grieving badly after David died, and that I was imagining things. What did she do? $14,000, Helen. She could barely say it. It was David's burial fund, the money I'd saved for his headstone. Diane offered to invest it in some special church fund, said she could get better returns. When I asked for it back to pay the monument company, she said it was tied up in the market. Then she told everyone I was confused. That grief had made me paranoid. I added Judith's story to the spreadsheet. The pattern was undeniable now. Case HK was growing into something bigger than just my story. It was a map of systematic predation. Ava was in her element. She was pulling public records, running database searches, cross-referencing names. This isn't just family drama, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. This is organized. Look at this. She pulled up 2 business registrations, King Family Ventures, LLC, and Madison's Future Fund, LLC, both registered to my parents' home address, both listing me as a stakeholder using my Social Security number. I never authorized any of this. I know you didn't, Ava said grimly. They're using your identity to create shell companies. This is money laundering infrastructure. The email list my mother sent included members of their church, Harborview Community Chapel. I recognized 2 names. An elderly couple, Frank and Dorothy Monroe. They were in their 80s, deeply religious. I sent them a neutral email from an anonymous account. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, I'm conducting a quiet inquiry into the financial management of certain church programs. Have you had any concerns about the International Mission Fund managed by Robert and Diane King? Frank Monroe replied within 2 hours. His email was polite but deeply troubled. We have been very concerned, yes. We have donated significantly to the Seychelles Mission Project over the past 3 years. However, we've been requesting itemized tax receipts for months and keep being told they're coming. The amounts Diane mentions verbally don't match our bank records. We're on a fixed income, and this is causing us great anxiety. We need those receipts for our taxes. They were skimming from elderly church members, from people on fixed incomes who trusted them. My Uncle Thomas, my father's brother, was the final piece that day. He'd been on the email list and he called me directly. Helen, he said, his voice low and angry. I knew this was coming. I've been waiting for this for 20 years. What do you mean, Uncle Thomas? Your father did this to his own mother? My mother? Your grandmother, Patricia? I sat down hard. Grandmother Patricia was someone I barely remembered. I was told she died when I was 12. She was in a nursing home before that, and my father managed all her affairs. About 25 years ago, Thomas continued, I went to visit Mom at the care facility. She was still lucid then. She was upset because Robert had brought her some bank papers to sign. I looked at them after he left. It wasn't routine paperwork. It was a durable power of attorney, giving him total control of her entire estate immediately. Not just in case of incapacitation. He tried to trick an elderly woman with early dementia into signing over everything. I called him out. He backed off, said it was a mistake from the lawyer. But Helen, he'd already signed the witness line himself. He was trying to forge it. After that, I never trusted him with $1, but Mom died 6 months later and everything went to him as executor. I've always wondered what else he did that I didn't catch. Ava was at her whiteboard drawing connections. She wrote down all the names. Diane, Robert, Emma, Claire, Judith, the Monroes, Thomas, Patricia. She started adding up the amounts. My $15,000, my $48,000 in fraudulent debt. Emma's $8,000, Claire's $12,000, Judith's $14,000. The Monroe's donations, which we estimated at least $5,000 a year for 3 years. This is over $160,000, Ava said, staring at the board. And that's just what we can document from a few phone calls. This has been going on for decades. The scale was staggering. My father was the architect. He understood legal systems, how to open credit lines, how to manipulate documents. My mother was the performer, the crying victim, the sweet church lady who manipulated emotions and cleaned up the social mess. They were a team. That night I couldn't sleep. I was on Ava's couch, the city lights glittering outside the windows. My Case HK file was open on my laptop, glowing in the dark. My prepaid phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was an alert from a monitoring service I'd set up. On instinct, I'd created public records alerts tied to my parents' names and email addresses. Anything that got filed, registered, or flagged would notify me. This alert was different. New account registration detected. Cox. Affiliated email, Robert King's primary address. Institution, Seychelles International Trust and Banking, Seychelles. A tiny island nation in the Indian Ocean. A place famous for banking secrecy and no extradition treaties. A place where people went to make money disappear. They weren't just stealing. They were planning to run. The notification sat on my phone screen. Seychelles International Trust and Banking. It wasn't just an account. It was an exit strategy. If they were planning to leave the country, they'd be liquidating every asset they could touch. I thought immediately of what Uncle Thomas had told me. He tried to get power of attorney over his own mother, my grandmother Patricia, but that was 25 years ago. Patricia had died shortly after, according to family history. But something felt wrong. The timeline. The convenient death right after my father's attempted fraud was exposed. I couldn't go to the police. The restraining order made it illegal for me to even mention my parents. But I could follow the paper trail. I spent the next day at the county clerk's office pulling public records. Patricia King's death certificate from 1999, her probate filing, her will. The will was simple, everything to her son Robert, to be held in trust for her granddaughters upon his death. Except there was a note attached to the probate file, a motion filed by someone named Arthur Harrington, a lawyer contesting the will. The motion claimed irregularities in the execution. The case was dismissed, but it raised questions. I called the law office listed, Harrington and Associates. The receptionist told me Arthur Harrington had retired 15 years ago, but gave me his personal number. When I called, an elderly man answered. Mr. Harrington, my name is Helen King. I'm researching my family history, and I found a case you worked on in 1999 regarding my grandmother Patricia King's estate. There was a long pause. Patricia King, he repeated slowly. Yes, I remember that case. I remember it very well because I was never convinced that woman was actually dead. My heart stopped. What do you mean? He sighed. Your grandmother Patricia was a brilliant businesswoman. She owned King Properties Group, a very successful real estate development company. When your father, Robert, came to me claiming she'd died and showing me her will, something felt off. The signature on the will looked wrong. The witnesses were questionable, and most importantly, the death certificate was issued by a small private facility I'd never heard of. I tried to investigate, but I was blocked at every turn. The case was dismissed for lack of standing. But I'll tell you something, Miss King. I got a letter about 5 years ago. Anonymous. It said Patricia King thanks you for trying, and that the truth would come out when it needed to. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. I pulled up the death certificate again and really looked at it. The facility. Greenwood Extended Care. I searched for it. It didn't exist anymore. It had closed in 2003, but I found an archived news article about it. Small, private care facility under investigation for fraudulent documentation. My grandmother might be alive. I shared everything with Ava that night. If she's alive, Ava said slowly, and your father told everyone she was dead, then legally he couldn't access her estate. Unless he forged everything, which means she's been hiding, protecting her assets, watching. The bus pass, I whispered suddenly. What? I pulled out my wallet. The monthly bus pass the old woman gave me was still there. I'd been using it every day. Don't let them make you their story. Oh my God, Ava? What if that was her? What if my grandmother has been watching me this whole time? We started searching. King Properties Group. It still existed, still operated, but the ownership records were buried in layers of trusts and holding companies. The registered agent was a law firm, Whitmore and Associates. I called them. I need to speak to someone about King Properties Group. It's regarding Patricia King. The receptionist put me on hold. When someone picked up, it was a woman's voice. Professional, cautious. This is Margaret Whitmore. Who am I speaking with? My name is Helen King. I'm Patricia King's granddaughter. There was a sharp intake of breath. Can you prove that? I can, I said, and I need help. My parents have been committing fraud using the King name. They're planning to flee the country, and I think my grandmother is alive. Come to my office tomorrow, Margaret said. Bring everything you have. Whitmore's office was in a steel and glass tower downtown. Margaret was a sharp-faced woman in her 60s. She looked at the restraining order, the fraud documentation, the Seychelles account alert. Then she opened a locked drawer in her desk and pulled out a file. This, she said, is the Patricia King protection file. I've been maintaining it for 24 years. Your grandmother is very much alive, Ms. King, and she's been waiting for this moment. She handed me a photograph. It was the woman from the bus, younger in the photo, but unmistakably her. Patricia faked her death in 1999 after your father attempted to steal her company. She had early-stage dementia at the time, but she was lucid enough to understand what was happening. With my help and Mr. Harrington's, she legally disappeared. She transferred all her assets into an irrevocable trust with a very specific clause. The inheritance would only be released to her granddaughters when they demonstrated, and I quote, moral resilience and documented integrity in the face of direct familial fraud. Margaret looked at me. She's been watching you your entire life, Helen. She watched you build your business from nothing. She watched your parents target you, and she's been waiting to see how you would respond. Would you become like them, or would you document and fight back? The restraining order hearing was in 3 days. Margaret made a call. Within an hour, I had a real lawyer, not legal aid, a civil litigation specialist named Davidson who worked for Margaret's firm. And I need to attend the hearing, Margaret said, as does Patricia. It's time. The Harborview County Courthouse was a modern building that smelled like floor wax and fear. I sat with Davidson and Margaret. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Stevens. My father looked gray. My mother looked smaller somehow. The defiance was still there, but underneath it was something else. Fear. Judge Brennan entered and we all stood. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s. She put on her reading glasses and looked at the file. I'm here to review the temporary restraining order filed by Robert and Diane King against their daughter, Helen King. Before we begin, I understand there's a motion to intervene. Margaret stood. Yes, Your Honor. I'm Margaret Whitmore, representing an interested party with direct standing in this matter. The clerk hurried to the bench and handed the judge a document. Judge Brennan's eyebrows shot up. She looked past my parents toward the back of the courtroom. Ms. Patricia King, the judge said. The clerk informs me you wish to address this court. I turned. There, standing at the back of the courtroom in her worn peacoat, was my grandmother. My mother made a sound, a high, thin noise like air escaping from a balloon. She went absolutely white. My father's head snapped around. His mouth fell open. Patricia walked forward slowly, steadily. She stopped in front of the bench. Patricia King, Your Honor, she said. Her voice was exactly as I remembered from the bus. Warm, steady, unshakable. I'm here on behalf of the King Family Trust, and I'm here as the maternal grandmother of Helen King. My paternal grandmother, I wanted to say, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Miss King, Judge Brennan said carefully, that's a very significant claim, given that court records show you deceased as of 1999. I am aware of what court records show, Your Honor, Patricia said calmly. Those records are fraudulent. They were created by my son Robert King in an attempt to steal my company and my estate. I have been alive and well for the past 24 years, living quietly and watching my family from a distance I was forced to establish after discovering Mr. King's attempts to forge power of attorney documents and manipulate my assets during a period of medical vulnerability. Stevens, my parents' lawyer, jumped to his feet. Objection! This is highly irregular. This woman's claims are unsubstantiated. And, Counselor, Judge Brennan's voice was ice. Sit down! This court is very interested in hearing about fraudulent death certificates and asset manipulation. Please continue, Ms. King. Patricia pulled a leather portfolio from her bag and handed it to the clerk. This contains my authenticated identity documents, medical records showing I was treated for early dementia in 1998 and have been in full remission since 2001, and a sworn affidavit detailing my son's attempted fraud 24 years ago. It also contains financial records showing that I am the sole owner of King Properties Group, a company worth approximately $50 million. A company my son has been attempting to access using my supposed death for over 2 decades. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Patricia turned and looked at me for the first time. I have been monitoring my granddaughter Helen for many years, she continued. I watched her build a small business with integrity and hard work. I watched her parents target her systematically, and I watched her make a choice. She could have screamed, she could have fought emotionally, she could have become what they tried to paint her as. Instead, she documented. She built a case. She chose evidence over emotion. That is the character requirement of my family trust. She placed another file on the clerk's desk. This is my own documentation of Robert and Diane King's activities over the past 20 years. It includes 4 separate instances where they used my name and the King Properties reputation to solicit investments and donations, which they then diverted to personal accounts. It includes evidence of identity theft against Helen. It includes testimony from multiple family members regarding loans that were never repaid. And it includes evidence that Mr. and Mrs. King have opened a foreign bank account in Seychelles and booked one-way travel, indicating clear flight risk. Finally, Your Honor, Patricia said, this contains documentation that the restraining order filed against Helen was a strategic move to silence her after she discovered their fraud. The allegations of instability and violence are fabrications designed to destroy her credibility while they prepare to flee the country with stolen assets. She finished. The file sat on the judge's desk like a bomb. Patricia walked slowly to where I sat. She leaned down close to my ear. I sat next to you on that bus, Helen, she whispered. I gave you that pass. I told you not to let them make you their story. I had to see which story you would write. Theirs, the hysterical victim they were creating, or yours, written in documents and evidence. You chose yours. You chose integrity. I'm very proud of you. She straightened and walked to a seat in the gallery. My mother was rocking slightly in her chair, making a low, keening sound. My father sat rigid as stone, his face the color of ash. Stevens, their lawyer, looked at his stack of papers, then at the judge. He had nothing. Judge Brennan looked at the files. Then she looked at my parents, then at me. "Mr. Stevens," she said, her voice cutting, "given this testimony, which reveals a multi-decade pattern of systematic fraud, and given the overwhelming evidence of identity theft, elder abuse, and extreme flight risk, this court finds more than sufficient grounds to not only deny the restraining order, but to reverse it entirely." She lifted her gavel. "The restraining order filed by Robert and Diane King is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate protective order preventing Robert and Diane King from contacting, approaching, or communicating with Helen King, Patricia King, or any witnesses in this matter. Additionally, I am issuing an emergency asset freeze on all accounts, domestic and international, held by Robert King, Diane King, and any associated business entities pending criminal investigation." She looked at my parents. "You will surrender your passports to this court by 5 p.m. today." The gavel cracked down like thunder. The day my parents were supposed to fly to Seychelles dawned cold and bright. Ava's monitoring system picked it up at 6 a.m. "They requested emergency replacement passports," she said, showing me her screen. "Claimed the originals were lost after surrendering them to the court. The system flagged them immediately. Detective Morgan from the Financial Crimes Unit was waiting at the airport. At 9:48, just 2 hours before their flight, Morgan and 2 state investigators intercepted them at the departure terminal. They were standing there with carry-on luggage, looking pale and desperate. Morgan walked up and held out the warrants. "Robert and Diane King, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. They found the real passports in my father's briefcase. One final stupid lie." By 3 that afternoon, they were in arraignment court wearing paper jumpsuits. The state prosecutor, a sharp woman named Torres, read the charges. It was a cascade. Conspiracy to commit bank fraud, identity theft, aggravated identity theft against multiple persons, 7 counts of tax evasion, elder financial abuse, conspiracy to launder money, attempted flight to avoid prosecution. While they sat in that courtroom, my email inbox was lighting up. Bayview Capital Legal Department. "In light of the criminal investigation and evidence of forgery, we are voiding the $20,000 fraudulent loan. All negative credit reports have been expunged. Please accept our apologies for the distress this caused. Harbor Valley Bank. We have completed our investigation in cooperation with state authorities. The $15,000 has been restored to your account with interest. All fraud claims have been substantiated. The pillars they'd kicked out from under me were being rebuilt." That same afternoon, Harborview Community Chapel released the findings of their forensic audit. The Blue Heron Mission Fund and Madison's Future Fund were shells. Over 80% of donations had been funneled directly to personal accounts. The church's statement was devastating. After a comprehensive audit, the board has determined that systematic financial deception occurred over a period of at least 8 years. All leadership positions held by the individuals in question have been terminated. The matter has been referred to authorities. My father's lawyer tried one last time to get bail. "Your Honor, my clients are longtime community members. They have roots here. They're not a flight risk." Prosecutor Torres didn't raise her voice. "Your Honor, the state presents the following: confirmed one-way tickets to a non-extradition country, wire transfers totaling $62,000 to an offshore account, communication records with international property brokers, and 2 emergency replacement passports they were carrying when arrested at the airport. They weren't planning to flee. They were in the process of fleeing when we stopped them." "Bail denied," Judge Brennan said. My parents were led away in handcuffs. I met Patricia at Margaret's office the next day. She looked the same as she had on the bus. Simple clothes, warm eyes. But now I knew who she really was. "Why did you wait so long?" I asked. "Why did you let them do this to me?" She took my hand. "Because giving you money when you were 25 would have taught you that rescue comes from outside. Watching you fight and document and refuse to break taught you that strength comes from within. The trust was never about money, Helen. It was about character. You proved yours. Now let me show you what you've earned." The King Family Trust was structured in layers. The first layer released immediately, $2 million for me, $1 million for Claire, enough to rebuild, to breathe, to start over. The second layer was conditional. If I wanted to continue my design business, the trust would match my investment dollar for dollar up to $500,000. If I wanted to go back to school, it would cover tuition. If I wanted to start something entirely new, the trust would provide seed capital. "You build it," Patricia said. "I'll support it." But you build it with your own hands and your own choices. The third layer was King Properties itself. Patricia was 78. She was in excellent health but realistic. "When I'm gone," she said, "this company becomes yours and Claire's equally. If you want to run it, you'll be trained. If you want to sell it and do something else, that's your choice. This is your inheritance, but it's also your responsibility." The next year was a blur. The criminal trial for my parents lasted 4 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Torres built the case like a prosecutor's dream. Paper trail after paper trail. Emma testified. Claire testified. Aunt Judith testified. Uncle Thomas testified. The Monroes testified. I testified last. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked the jury through the spreadsheet, the timeline, the pattern. Prosecutor Torres held up the final exhibit. This is a photograph taken by Ms. King. On the left, a check written by an elderly church member for mission donations. On the right, a receipt for luxury goods purchased 3 days later. This pattern repeats 47 times over 8 years. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. My father got 18 years federal prison. My mother got 14. They're in their 60s now. They'll likely die in prison. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and free. With the trust money, I did 3 things. First, I hired a trauma therapist. I spent 6 months learning that family dysfunction wasn't my fault, that I didn't owe anyone my silence, that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty. Second, I relaunched my design business, not as Helen King Design, but as Integrity Creative. I specialized in rebranding for companies recovering from scandal and individuals rebuilding their professional reputation after fraud. I hired 2 designers and a project manager. Within a year, we had 25 clients. Third, I bought a small building in the art district and converted the top floor into a studio apartment. I painted the walls white. I filled it with light. I made it mine. Patricia and I had dinner every Sunday. Sometimes Claire flew in from Seattle and joined us. We never talked about my parents. We talked about art, about business, about life. Patricia told me stories about building King Properties from nothing in the 1970s, about fighting for respect in a male-dominated industry, about learning when to be loud and when to document quietly. On my 33rd birthday, she gave me a gift. It was a framed photograph. The old woman on the bus, me sitting next to her, both of us in profile. "I didn't even know this existed," I said. "I asked someone to take it," Patricia said. "I wanted to remember the day you chose paper over noise." 2 years after the trial, I was on the number 9 bus, not because I had to be, but because I wanted to be. I found clarity in the routine, in the rhythm of the city. A young woman got on, probably mid-20s. She sat down across from me. She was crying quietly, looking at her phone. I could see the screen. Bank notification. Account overdrawn. Multiple transactions. I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card. Integrity Creative. I wrote something on the back and handed it to her. She looked at me, confused. "What's this?" "Help," I said quietly. "If someone in your family did this, document everything. Keep the paper. Don't argue. Don't engage. Build the case. My firm helps people like you for free." She looked at the card, then back at me. "How did you know?" "Because it happened to me too," I said. "And I survived. So will you." The bus pulled up to my stop. I stood and walked to the door. Before I got off, I looked back. She was still holding the card, staring at it like it was a lifeline. Maybe it was. I stepped off the bus into the bright afternoon. My phone buzzed. A text from Ava. "Client meeting at 3. New referral from Claire. Another fraud recovery case." I smiled. I had found my calling. Not just design, but documentation. Not just art, but advocacy. I had turned my worst experience into my greatest purpose. That night, Patricia and I sat on her waterfront balcony, the one I never knew existed until 2 years ago. We watched the sun set over Harbor Bay. "You know what I'm proudest of," she said. "Not that you survived. Not that you won. I'm proud that you didn't become them. You had every reason to be bitter, to be cruel, to use your power for revenge. Instead, you use it to help other people escape the same trap. That's real strength." I leaned my head on her shoulder. The woman who raised me taught me that family means obligation. The woman who saved me taught me that family means choice. I choose you, Grandma. I choose integrity. I choose the paper trail. She laughed, the sound warm and bright in the evening air. "Good girl," she said. "Now let's order takeout and watch terrible television. That's what real family does." We did, and it was perfect. 3 years later, Integrity Creative had expanded to 15 employees. We'd helped 43 people document and prosecute family fraud. We'd recovered over $3 million in stolen assets for victims. I'd been featured in Forbes under Designers Changing Lives. I'd spoken at conferences about using organizational skills to combat financial abuse. I'd written a book, The Paper Trail: How I Used Design Thinking to Expose Fraud and Reclaim My Life. And every morning, I rode the number 9 bus. Not because I had to, but because it reminded me of where I started. Every time I saw someone sitting alone, looking scared, clutching papers or a phone showing bad news, I thought about the old woman in the pea coat who handed me a bus pass and told me not to let them make me their story. That woman saved my life, not with money, with wisdom, with patience, with the belief that I was strong enough to save myself. I just needed someone to believe it first. Now I'm that person for someone else. And the story continues, written not in tears or screams, but in documents, evidence, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to be broken. My name is Helen King. I'm 35 years old. I survived family fraud. And this is my story, written on my own terms, in my own words, with my own evidence. They tried to make me their victim. I made myself their consequence. Thank you for listening.